Next up tonight on CCC, we turn to the cases of North Carolina Central University School of Law and Rich Leonard. We all know that North Carolina Central University School of Law is a wonderful, historically black law school in Durham, North Carolina. They are searching for a dean of the school after their dean unexpectedly dropped dead recently. Across town, if you will, in Raleigh, North Carolina Central Black School in Durham, founded in the 40s. Raleigh's law school is Campbell University, white school. I taught at both. Taught at Campbell for 6 years, taught at North Carolina Central for 1. And we have this dean search, and a whistleblower former student has phoned me to inform me that Rich Leonard, the white dean of Campbell Law School, the competitor school, is serving on the search committee of North Carolina Central, the black law school dean search. And we're all scratching our heads because Rich Leonard is in the middle of a lawsuit against his school that's race discrimination. That's my suit. That's why this former student called me to report her alma mater. She's appalled. This is a law school, Campbell, that under Rich Leonard tenured a black once and did it only after my public ultimatum from this show.
Come out and answer the question. How can you tenure incompetent or less than competent white professors and not tenure black professors? How can you do it? Dean, how can you do it? Dean, how can you do it?
And did it late. It took 7 years for that black woman to get it during litigation. But my lawsuit wasn't the only one. I'm holding up the lawsuit of a custodian who in Rich Leonard's suite had her grandchild called a monkey. A black woman, grandmother, with her black grandchild, an assistant in the dean's suite, called this little black boy a monkey. And then when she complained about it, the custodian was denied employment that she had applied for. She filed a federal lawsuit. Gina Calabro, the current general counsel of Campbell University, defended this suit when she worked for the law firm of Ogletree Deakins. Now, Gina Calabro is an interesting one because she could have resolved this at the EEOC. I represented this black custodian at the EEOC. It took 2 years. And she got into federal court. The case was settled. It was a pro se complaint. Talk about a strong black woman fighting back. This was a janitor. And out she went into the court in North Carolina. And Rich Leonard presided over this school that did this. My suit is still going. I can prove it. This is the Campbell University brief right now pending in the Fourth Circuit, where they reveal in their brief, in my case that's been going for 5 years, that the judge to which my case was assigned was employed by Rich Leonard as an adjunct professor, and they assigned the case to the judge employed by Rich Leonard. I don't understand why North Carolina Central, right now there are no tenured black professors on that faculty. They had asked me, Rich Leonard, to apply for tenure early. The minute I did it, I was at Oxford University on a visitorship. They took my pay. They didn't pay me for that year. I worked anyway for the school for free on the admissions committee. And boy, if the North Carolina Central University people knew what people over there were saying about them at Campbell, at the white school, that's about 3% black enrollment, you have no idea how they really feel about you, North Carolina Central. I don't know why you would put the white dean with these race discrimination lawsuits against this school where they don't have any tenured black professors, and the Asian one left and joined your faculty. And that's Kevin Lee. On Kevin's on way out the door this year, he bashed the racism at the school. Kevin Lee told me that he was reporting the school back in 2016 to the American Bar Association for race issues. And Rich Leonard told our faculty in a faculty meeting when I was there that the American Bar Association in their reaccreditation was concerned about the low number of black professors. Campbell later defended by saying, it's the number of adjuncts or whatever. But if the American Bar Association is telling you with their history of excluding blacks that you shouldn't be excluding blacks so much, why are you then not having black tenured professors? Why are you on the search committee at North Carolina Central University? So I invite Rich Leonard right on here. You know, Rich, I worked for you as when you were the dean over a couple of years there. I voted for you, or at least voted not to oppose you when we were looking at you. But I'm very disappointed, and I don't know. You go to Namibia, and you've been over there advising the Africans on court systems because you worked over 7 decades, 70s, 80s, 90s, aughts, and 10s, 5 decades. You were in the Eastern District of North Carolina Federal Courthouse in various capacities, clerk, bankruptcy judge, all this, chief bankruptcy judge, all this stuff. Never a black judge in the history of that. Now there's a Jamaican who they classify as white, according to my professor colleague out of Mississippi, who told me this is a white Jamaican that Donald Trump appointed. It's the blackest district in North Carolina for a court district. Never a black judge in 160 years. Rich Leonard was there all that time in the courthouse. I don't know why North Carolina Central thinks this is the person to put on their search committee. I just think there's a more qualified African American dean somewhere. Maybe they're afraid. This law firm, Ogletree Deakins, that represents Campbell, Rich Leonard came rolling in with Thomas Farr. The last time I saw Rich Leonard was on Juneteenth in 2020. Rich Leonard and I were in the same room at the law firm of Ogletree Deakins under Thomas Farr. We'll get to Thomas Farr and Farr Rich Leonard in a minute. Caller, you're on WBGR Live, and we're talking about Rich Leonard and Thomas Farr, with whom Rich Leonard appeared at the offices of Ogletree Deakins in Raleigh on Juneteenth to confront me and not 2 lawyers. You're on the line. How can we answer your question this evening?
Yes, Mr. Jones, I remember you on a year or so ago talking about the same case, and I'm surprised there's 2 going on. These vile racists at this school under the banner of Christianity. Mr. Jones, why would the black school put this person on their board? What I don't understand.
That's a very good question, caller. Thank you. The question is, why would a black school put this white man who went around with Thomas Farr, and I'm getting to that one, why is he sitting on a black school? And the schools compete. I think that North Carolina Central's leadership is afraid of the white bench in North Carolina. I really do. And Rich Leonard is deeply entrenched. That's his home state. He went to Yale Law School. He's a very bright man. I had a very high opinion of Rich Leonard until they showed up on Juneteenth. And the defendants were sanctioned that day because 2 of the 4 white defendants didn't come. Timothy Zinnicker was a no-show in violation of a court order to show up, and so was President Bradley Creed, who's supposed to be an ordained Baptist minister at this Christian school. Bradley Creed, who is Dean of Baylor Divinity and Provost at Samford. Bradley Creed, whose investiture, I delivered the scripture there at the investiture. And he was a no-show, and the judge sanctioned Campbell defendants for failure to show up on Juneteenth. My lawyer flew in from New York City. I was there from Washington, D.C., and we had a lawyer, a former North Carolina Central student. As I hire my former students. And there we all were, and half of them didn't show. Well, we know why. We now know, and we have on appeal, a motion for further sanctions against Campbell University for not divulging that they and Ogletree Deakins law firm, where Thomas Farr was a big partner over decades, that they were 2 peas in a pod and didn't disclose it. We had a $250,000 settlement agreement with Campbell, and then Ogletree Deakins wanted to make themselves parties to the agreement by name. Highly objectionable, and report it to the court. And that's a Rule 26G3 sanction, We allege it's on appeal at the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Fourth Circuit because the judge mooted that when I voluntarily dismissed my case so that we can bring it back and get these defendants set up right. We have a caller on WBGR. You're live, and the topic is Rich Leonard, Thomas Farr.
Yes, Professor Jones, thank you for taking my call. I'm aghast at all of this. How can people, get the word out about this? This is appalling. What can people do to rise up against this? I cannot believe that an HBCU is doing such silly stuff. What has this world come to? Can you speak to, how we can help support?
Thank you, caller.
People like these avowed racists, out of office?
Yes, the way to rise up is to voice your concern. The question is, how vile, how twisted for a black law school where Maynard Jackson went to school? How could this school bring on the accessory to Thomas Farr, Rich Leonard, with all this litigation? And you can do it by joining with the demonstration. Rich Leonard was faced by Jeanette Pollard, the former late host of this program, who traveled with an imam and black leaders and me and demonstrated in front of Rich Leonard's school when he had the nerve to be bringing in black judges in a portrait exhibit, and down we went in order to expose the litigation and the discrimination and the all-white review tenure that they have going. Every white person gets it. White women especially who didn't meet the criteria. They passed 2 white women and gave them associate professor promotion who didn't file an application for associate professor. They made me file 400 pages and I got mine at the same time. They gave it to the 2 white women who didn't file associate professor promotions, but they made me apply. But you go to court when you know that they're going to assign it to Judge Deaver, who works on your payroll, Rich Leonard's payroll, Judge Deaver, the federal judge. And so that's the problem. So you can join, and we'll announce this on the web where you can go. We'll put, when this reruns, we will put the website you can go to and join in demonstrations against North Carolina Central and Rich Leonard. But let me talk about Thomas Farr, who represented this school until last year when he left the firm, after we filed the Ku Klux Klan Act lawsuit in the District of Columbia. Ogletree Deacon's law firm faces, because it's coming back, the Ku Klux Klan Act lawsuit for civil rights conspiracy violations in the District of Columbia. This lawsuit was filed, and according to the lawsuit, it was Reverend William Barber's arch nemesis, Thomas Farr, who represented Rich Leonard in these civil rights cases. The last time I laid eyes on Rich Leonard, shame on him, it was Juneteenth. There were 2 of his people, failure to appear, sanctioned for it by the court, failure to appear in violation of court order. Go to directaction.church to read about that and watch the video at www.directaction.church. But I guess the white trustees at Campbell pay the white law firm, and they're all getting good money out of it. So it's really a churn and burn operation going. But this is what the Reverend William Barber here on Gospel Radio, WBGR. BGR stands for Believing in God Radio. And I believe in God. And I believe that God's justice will rain down on all this evil, especially when you read what Reverend Dr. William Barber II wrote in the New York Times when he called it Trump's terrible choice for judge. And he called this Thomas Farr part of a white supremacist machine in eastern North Carolina, in the Eastern District. That's the district that had never had a black judge in history, and it's the Black Belt of North Carolina, and the blackest circuit in America, the Fourth Circuit. I believe that the spirit of the Wilmington coup, the only successful coup in the United States of America in history, happened with a good interracial fusion black-white government right at the end of Reconstruction around 1900. And a white armed minority stormed and violently took control of Wilmington, North Carolina, which was then the largest city in the state. And they took it over, and that political machine is involved to this day, the remnants of that, in order to keep this thing going. And I guess that's why Thomas Farr was nominated to be a federal judge in Rich Leonard's former court. Now we know why North Carolina Central University has this gun to their head to validate Rich Leonard, the competitor, with all this history, all this ongoing litigation. Read the Fourth Circuit briefs. Read the Rule 26G3 motion for sanctions. Read about Gina Calabro and her misconduct, we allege, in the Ku Klux Klan Act lawsuit filed last year in the District of Columbia. We must protest North Carolina Central for what they're doing. Alumni must call the dean and call the president of North Carolina Central, notify the trustees, of course, but we also must pray that they repent and that the white power structure that Rich Leonard is so entrenched in with Thomas Farr, that the Leonard Farr motif will convert to our cause of liberty and justice for all and finally start giving black people equal employment opportunity. If you don't even tenure black people, except when Amos Jones issues an ultimatum on WBGR, which I did twice before they tenured the black woman, I had to engineer the vote for them to get the black woman. And Lisa Lukasik, my colleague, was valiant and heroic in her efforts. She's a very pro-black professor. The white professor, Lisa Lukasik, helped me. Lisa, God bless you for being a voice in the wilderness in that school. Maybe you should be on that dean search committee instead of Rich Leonard because you helped us get a black woman. Lisa Lukasik, you told me that it's a shame for students to walk into that law school and the only black woman they could see from the ground to the top floor was a floor washing janitor. And the sad thing is the janitor was a white collar employee. She took the job for the education benefit and still couldn't get promoted. And that's why she filed suit. And Gina Calabro let it get out in court. We had an expert report about Monkey Baby in the Dean Suite, Rich Leonard's office, the assistant's office. We had an expert report by Dr. Gregory Parks, Dean of Faculty Development at Wake Forest Law School. Dr. Parks has a PhD in clinical psychology, and Dr. Parks has a JD from Cornell and clerk for Judge Anna Blackburn Rigsby, the former equivalent of the Chief Justice in Washington, D.C. Anna Blackburn, he clerked for her, and this black dean in North Carolina opined on Rich Leonard's school and what they've been doing to black people. And Rich, you're welcome to call in right now and explain why you should not be asked to leave and get out of North Carolina Central until such time as Campbell University under you repents for this race segregation that you're practicing and that you're fighting in these courts. I have pleading after pleading after pleading after pleading after pleading. And you all are paying Gina Calabro's former firm, and you promoted her to your general counsel. When this case got assigned against your school to someone on your payroll, Judge Deaver. That's the first thing that happened in that court that never had a black judge in history, unless you count the Jamaican that the professor told me is a white Jamaican that President Trump just appointed in the end of his term. If 5% of those funds had gone into these real civil rights practices such as mine, you wouldn't have to fight 4 years to expose Kentucky State. A black janitor at Campbell Law up under Rich Leonard suffering wouldn't have to sue pro se in an all-white courthouse where Rich worked for all those decades. This is the lawsuit. This is the monkey black boy in the Dean Suite lost. Gina Calabro, who defended this in court and at the EEOC, she's the general counsel of Campbell. People need to know. If people knew that, maybe they would invest in the right remedies.